Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Zamond, and I'm the Associate Manager of Publications and Programs at the Spondylitis Association of America. Thank you for joining us today for a discussion and demonstration of the benefits of yoga for spondyloarthritis. I'm excited to welcome our guest speaker today, Sandra Voss, RYT 200, a wonderful yoga teacher and leader of SAA's New York City Spondyloarthritis Support Group. So later in the program, Sandra is going to be leading us through a live yoga sequence that you can follow along with at home, which will be done in the seated and standing positions. To get the most out of this experience, please make sure you have a few items nearby, a non-moving chair and either a small footstool or a pillow for stability. So first, Sandra, welcome, and please tell us a bit about yourself.
Thanks so much, Rachel. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, like you said, I'm a yoga teacher in New York City, and I lead the New York City support group for the Spondylitis Association. And I'm excited to share what I've learned with everyone here today about yoga for spondyloarthritis.
Awesome. So how long have you been practicing yoga, and what led you to pursue your yoga teacher training and your specific training in yoga for arthritis?
Yeah, so I think the first time I ever did yoga was actually in elementary school at a summer camp. And then I just did it, a little bit here or there in high school, mostly in college and then afterwards. And then I decided to become a yoga teacher kind of partly because of my own spondyloarthritis, actually. When I was diagnosed in 2015, my doctor highly recommended that I develop a good strengthening and stretching routine. So I started stretching really regularly and found that that was helpful for me. And then it was actually because of the SAA, I went to a seminar at the Hospital for Special Surgery where one of my favorite yoga teachers, Nancy O'Brien, did a presentation on some mind-body approaches, some breathing exercises for pain. And she actually kind of inspired me to start looking into yoga for chronic pain. And then later on, I was working full time and just spending a lot of time sitting, a lot of time at the computer. And it just felt like becoming a yoga teacher was sort of the clear choice for me to be able to move more throughout the day, sit less, and then also share those benefits with other people. And then as far as yoga for arthritis, I just wanted to learn more about both the specific benefits of yoga for different types of arthritis and modifications and how to safely practice with people with spondyloarthritis and other types of arthritis as well.
That's wonderful. And yes, we love Nancy O'Brien. We in fact did a couple of live programs with her on meditations for pain and fatigue. So yeah, she's a wonderful teacher. So I would love to talk about some of the physical benefits of yoga for spondyloarthritis. We know flexibility, range of motion, balance. Can you talk about those and any others? And how has your yoga practice personally impacted you with your SPA?
Yeah, definitely. So of course, we already know that yoga is one of the most, that exercise is one of the most important parts of managing spondyloarthritis. And I think yoga is sort of uniquely great, one, because it's low impact, also because it can really be modified to suit so many different ability levels, and you really don't need much equipment to do it. Like ideally a yoga mat, maybe some blocks, but you don't need much. You can just do it at home. And like you said, it's great for flexibility, balance, just maintaining mobility. It's also good just for general strength and also core strength, which is important for us with spondylitis, just kind of helping to support our spine. And even though it's not generally a huge cardio workout, it does also have some cardiovascular benefits. It gets the blood flow going, gets the heart rate going. And the deep breathing aspects can actually help with rib expansion too, which can be an issue for some people with spondyloarthritis, having reduced rib expansion. So all of those things are super beneficial. And for myself, I think that yoga has just, not only has it helped me to manage my pain and just maintain flexibility and mobility, it also has just helped me with mindfulness and being sort of more aware of my body, more aware of how I'm sitting, just kind of making good choices throughout the day. And I think finally, it's also just sort of empowering and comforting to have this practice that I know I can go to help with pain. It's something that's sort of simple that I can do at the end of the day, even if I'm really tired. it doesn't have to be, a huge hour-long yoga class. Just a few stretches can make such a difference. So yeah, it's been great.
That's wonderful. Yes. And to touch on your last point, we often see portrayals of yoga as being all about perfect poses, which can be intimidating for some, but yoga can be modified actually to many levels of ability and isn't about perfection at all. So I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
Yes, this is something I'm super passionate about. So a lot of people, I think, especially in the West, tend to think of yoga as just exercise or just for people who are really flexible. And often the way we see it portrayed, on Instagram or in clothing ads, it's always like super fit, thin, able-bodied people. And a lot of people don't realize that you can really modify almost any yoga pose to be more accessible, more gentle, even to be done in a chair. So it really doesn't have to be just for super sort of quote unquote fit people. And also that it's not even about trying to achieve a certain pose. It's about connecting to your own mind and body and doing something that's going to be beneficial for you. It's really kind of a internal practice of connecting with your own mind and body. So I think that's just an important thing to remember about yoga.
That's excellent. And in addition to the physical postures, there are many other key aspects of yoga, some of which you mentioned, such as the focus on breath and mindfulness. So how do these aspects benefit practitioners mentally?
Yeah, so it's really exciting. There's a lot of research going on about this, a lot of research that has already shown that yoga, meditation, certain types of breathing practices, and mindfulness, which if you're not familiar with mindfulness, it's generally defined as just being in tune with the present moment, not thinking too much about the past or the future, but just kind of being in the present. That all those things have been shown to reduce stress and anxiety, and even sometimes pain itself. And it's just kind of a really growing field. There's exciting research about, for example, the vagus nerve is a nerve that runs through the torso up into the brain, and that certain types of slow breathing stimulate this nerve, which then literally slows down the nervous system. So this stuff really works and can definitely help with stress and pain.
That's excellent. And the next question is actually about stress. So that was a good lead in. Many in the spondyloarthritis community can find that stress can trigger a flare, bringing on periods of more active disease. And it sounds like yoga can actually help with stress. So what are some practical ways of using yoga and breathing practices for stress reduction? And stress reduction is actually one of the pillars of lifestyle medicine, which has so many benefits for those in the spa community. So I'd love for you to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think kind of like I touched on before, it's just important to remember that it doesn't have to be like an all or nothing thing where you're making time for a whole hour-long yoga class, that even just incorporating small amounts of breathing practices, yoga or meditation can really help to reduce stress and anxiety. So if you really are super into yoga and meditation, by all means, have a daily practice or, go to a weekly class, put it on your calendar. But I think it also can just be great during moments of stress or pain to just do, even just a minute of deep breathing can be so beneficial. So just kind of remembering that every little bit helps as far as stress and anxiety and pain.
Excellent. So for those watching today who have never tried yoga, who live with spondyloarthritis, what's a good place to start?
Yeah, great question. So there are a few organizations that focus specifically on yoga for spondyloarthritis. There's Yoga for AS in the UK, Yoga for Arthritis here in the US, and I think they have an international reach as well, but they're based here. And then Spondy Strong, a program that I co-founded with my colleague Alex Levine. But you can also just try a private yoga session with an experienced yoga teacher. That's a good way to ensure that it's super safe and super tailored to your own needs. It'll be just you in the room, totally modified to suit whatever you need. Or if you want to try a group class, often gentle yoga can be a good place to start, or yoga for beginners, or chair yoga, if that's something that would be helpful for you. If you don't really have any mobility issues or fusions, even a lot of mainstream classes can be good, just as long as you really listen to your body and not do anything that causes pain, and ideally let the teacher know about your condition and any concerns that you might have.
And how does gentle yoga differ from regular yoga practice?
That's a great question. I'm sure it's different at different yoga studios because it's not, sort of an official term, but it's generally going to be just a sort of slower paced class, maybe more poses seated on the floor, less moving around, not so much of a flow. Like if you've ever done vinyasa yoga, there's a lot of movement there. Like gentle will just be kind of a little bit little slower pace, a little more accessible, a little more kind of geared towards quieting down the nervous system, more calming, less energizing.
That's great. And can you also just talk a bit about what specifically yoga for arthritis is?
Yes, so it's a really great program that incorporates yoga for all types of arthritis, so including rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis. And so you can find, if you go on their website, you can find teachers who are certified in it and figure out a way to take their classes, or you can also just check out their website. They have different videos there, but they've created a whole program that kind of uses, or it keeps in mind all of the concerns that people with arthritis have in order to allow them to safely practice yoga and to use it to really benefit their pain and mobility and stress as well.
Wonderful. And so what are some best practices and safety principles to keep in mind? Are there some general considerations you might suggest for people with spondyloarthritis who want to practice yoga? Maybe certain props to keep handy or certain poses to either avoid altogether or to be extra careful with?
Yes, this is definitely an important question. So I would say, as far as safety concerns, I think one of the number one things is just to really listen to your body. And especially if you're in a group class, don't feel sort of socially pressured to do what everyone else is doing or to push yourself to try your hardest. It's really important just to do what's going to work best for you. There's no shame at all in modifying or taking a break or just doing something a little bit differently. And then as far as specifics, so if you're familiar with yoga, some poses that are good to avoid, especially if you have any neck fusions. So things like fish or camel, where you're really tipping your head straight back, or poses where you're bending your chin in towards your chest and putting force on it, like shoulder stand or plow. Those are better to avoid. And then just being cautious with back bends, not going too far into a back bend, really trying to go slowly with control, using your muscular control, not to just kind of drop into a back bend, but just being very cautious. And then also with twists, not forcing a twist, not like, grabbing onto the floor or your chair to really crank your spine into a twist, but just going as far as is sort of natural and comfortable. And then as far as props, I think props are great. I know that a lot of yoga practitioners and teachers, myself included, I sort of used to think of them as like, oh, you only need props if you're not very flexible or you need some extra help. But I think they're great to just use all the time. They're so beneficial. Using a blanket for cushioning under your knees or your back. I often use 2 yoga mats, just one stacked on top of each other to have a little more cushioning. And then blocks are great just to kind of bring the floor closer to you, or pillows. You can use all kinds of pillows to make some really comfortable supported poses. And then either a strap or in the era of Zoom yoga, we found lots of strap substitutes like a bathrobe belt or, any kind of non-stretchy thing just to help you get into certain stretches a little bit more easily.
That's wonderful. And I hadn't thought of the doubling your yoga mat idea. That's so great to provide just a little bit of extra cushioning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot more comfortable.
That's excellent. Okay, we have a couple questions coming in live from Facebook. So one person is asking, they have scoliosis as well as osteoporosis. Are there any additional modifications you would suggest for somebody who has these additional conditions along with spondyloarthritis?
Yeah, that's a great question. Osteoporosis definitely came up during my yoga for arthritis training. That's just another precaution to think about. And that can be even more of a concern, actually, specifically for twists. What I was talking about with like not cranking your spine around, that if you've had any osteoporosis in the spine, that could be dangerous. And I think just being extra cautious with anything where you're kind of putting more stress on the joints, like a back bend, just really, really listening to your body. We should all be doing this, but even more so, I think, with osteoporosis. And then with scoliosis, I'm not an expert on it. I don't know a lot about the research, but I do know that when I did the anatomy portion of my yoga teacher training, our anatomy teacher mentioned that yoga can actually help to correct scoliosis or other kind of imbalances in the body, especially if you are able to kind of understand which side to focus on more to sort of bring things back into alignment. So I don't know a lot about it, but I know that that's one possibility. So I think maybe working more closely with a really experienced yoga teacher or even someone with some expertise in anatomy could be helpful for that.
That's really fascinating. Thank you for that, Sandra.
Yeah.
All right. And now, if you don't mind, I know that you have some yoga postures to demonstrate. I know you're going to demonstrate some of your favorite stretches for the lower back, for reducing lower back pain, boosting spinal mobility, and we're ready for you. So yeah, please go ahead and get ready for that. And please talk us through what you're doing so that those watching at home can try those out later. And I know you mentioned fusion earlier when we were talking about certain things to avoid. So if there are any modifications for those who have spinal fusion, it would be great to talk about those. And I will just give a brief disclaimer. For anybody following along at home, please note that you should modify these exercises as appropriate so you aren't doing anything that hurts. That's the most important thing. And always remember to please consult your physician before starting a new exercise program, since each person has different needs. So that would be our advice. And yeah, we're looking forward to some demonstrations.
Yes, can you hear me? I had to switch my headphones.
Hear you just fine, thanks.
Okay, so I'm just going to move you all over here so that you can see my mat on the floor here. There we go.
Perfect.
I'll just move my chair. Okay. So these are some of my personal favorite stretches. My pain tends to be mostly in my lower back, so these are a little bit more geared towards that. You might find that your top, 5 stretches are different for you, but these are some of mine. So I'm going to start with forward fold, which is simply standing with your feet about hip distance apart and then folding over your legs. And if you have hypermobility like me, your hands might reach the ground, but they also might not, which is totally fine. So you can always use some blocks or pillows or paper towel rolls to bring the floor a little closer to you. And then in forward fold, if your legs are straight, it's sort of more of a hamstring stretch. But if you bend your knees, it becomes more of a lower back release. And you can really bend them a lot, even letting your torso rest down on your thighs, maybe holding on to your opposite elbows and just letting everything hang down. This can be a great one for releasing the lower back. And you can actually even do this one in a chair. This is a great one to do during the workday. You just need a little stretch break, and we'll do this later during the guided sequence. So you just fold down over your legs, hanging down, getting that nice lower back release. And if it's more comfortable for your belly, you can also bring your knees out wide and kind of let your torso hang between your knees, and maybe using your blocks or pillows to bring the floor closer in your chair forward fold. So that is number 1, forward fold. Just gonna move my chair.
That's wonderful. And to do that safely, you should not do that on a chair with casters or rollers. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say ideally a stable chair will be better. Yeah, for that one.
Excellent.
And so then my next favorite is cat-cow, which starts out in a tabletop position with your wrists right under your shoulders, your knees under your hips, and try not to hyperextend your elbows the way that I always do. And then I have 2 yoga mats, so this is enough cushioning. If you needed more, putting a folded blanket or towel under your knees can be really nice for this one. And then for cat-cow, what you do is on your inhale, you arch your spine, sending your tailbone up towards the ceiling, sending your forehead upwards, but it's fine if it doesn't go very far. You're thinking about broadening your collarbones. And then as you exhale, you round your spine, maybe looking in towards your belly button, trying to really puff your back up towards the ceiling. And then take a couple rounds going back and forth. And this is a great one just for getting some mobility in the spine, stretching the muscles along the spine. And this can even be a very small movement. It doesn't have to be big. You might just barely arch your spine, barely round your spine, just with the goal of getting some nice movement going. And it's nice to also link the movement with your breathing. So really using your whole inhale to come up, and then using your whole exhale to round your spine. So that is cat. Oh, and I didn't mention actually, technically this is cow and this is cat, in case you're curious which animal was which.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Any questions about that one, Rachel?
I think it would just be helpful to hear. So for those who may not have the flexibility to really do that arch or really sink down, what should people be feeling for to get the most out of that pose?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I will be showing a seated cat-cow later when we do the guided sequence. So that will definitely be a good option. But wherever you are in this pose, you're just aiming to arch your spine kind of more than you typically would throughout the day. And then you're aiming to round your spine a bit more intentionally than you typically would. It's just sort of trying to bring your spine into a little bit of a wider range of motion than you're used to, and thinking about when you round it, kind of imagining you're really puffing your back up towards the ceiling. And when you're coming down into your cow, just thinking about lifting your tailbone, broadening your collarbones. And even if it doesn't necessarily feel like you're experiencing those things super intensely, just thinking about them can really help to get a bit of that sensation.
That's excellent. And we do have a question. What do you recommend for cat-cow when you have hand and wrist arthritis? Are there any modifications for that?
Yes, definitely. So one thing is to just make fists and be up on your knuckles. And actually, if you happen to have hand weights, that can even be a little more comfortable if you just hold your hand weights straight underneath you. That brings some of the pressure off of your wrist. Another option is if you take a blanket or towel and then you put the heels of your hands on top of it, so you're sort of decreasing that wrist angle. Instead of being like that, it's a little bit less of an angle. And that you can use that for downward dog as well.
That's a wonderful modification. Thank you.
All right. And so then my next favorite, this is sort of tied for my all-time favorite, is child's pose. So traditionally, child's pose, you bring your knees as wide as your mat, your toes come together, and then you sit your hips back towards your heels, reaching your arms forward, and then bringing your forehead down to the mat. And this is a really great release for the lower back. Feels really great. But of course, there are many modifications for this as well, because that exact type of child's pose isn't comfortable for everyone. Just one of my personal favorites is to actually bring the knees and feet all the way together and then sit back on the heels and then bring your hands back behind you. This just gives a slightly different release to the lower back. But then there's a whole bunch of other modifications, including putting some pillows under your torso. This can give a lot more support for the torso. You can turn your cheek to the side or just put your face right down on your pillow. You can also put a block under your head, which makes it a little bit less intense on your back and shoulders. It kind of just decreases the angle of your torso to the ground. And then if you have knee issues and it's painful to bend your knees at quite such a sharp angle, you can put a rolled blanket or towel behind your knees. And so then when you sink your hips back, that also decreases the angle of your bent knees. And I believe, yeah, those are all of my child's pose modifications.
That's wonderful. I'm glad you showed the knee modification. That was one of my questions too. And is there a sort of a seated analog to child's pose?
Ooh, that is a very good question. I think that the seated forward fold that I showed kind of gets at a similar feeling, kind of releasing the lower back and letting your torso come down and just sort of that calming feeling of bending forward. I think that you could also try, if you had another chair out in front of you, you could try extending your arms towards that chair, seeing how that feels. It gets a little bit more of that extension. But it's definitely something to play with. You know, I think there's kind of an infinite number of modifications that you could try for various different poses.
Awesome. Thank you for showing that. Great.
Absolutely. All right. And so my next favorite, which I think is tied with child's pose for number one favorite, is simply coming onto your back and then hugging your knees in towards your chest. And this is one where I think it's really helpful to either have two mats. Mainly two mats. You don't want to have too much cushioning, which I'll explain in a second. And first you can just squeeze your knees in. This can be a really nice release for the lower back. And then my favorite thing to do is to either rock back and forth or to make circles. And this gives a really nice massage for the lower back on the floor. And if you have tons of padding, like if you're on a really thick carpet, you might not feel very much in this massaging part. So it's good to kind of find the right balance of how much cushioning you need. It can be too intense if you just had a thin mat on a hard floor. It might be too much. But when you find the right amount, it can feel really nice. I don't know about other people, but I tend to get a lot of knots in my lower back. So this just sort of feels like it kind of smooths them out. So that is my other favorite.
That's fantastic. And one question, if someone has had a hip replacement, are there any modifications you might suggest to accommodate that?
Yes, there are a lot of them, and it actually depends on which type of hip replacement they've had. I believe there's both an anterior hip replacement and a posterior one, and off the top of my head, I can't remember all of the modifications for each one, but this is definitely something that's taught in Yoga for Arthritis, so any teacher trained in Yoga for Arthritis would be able to help provide modifications for that. And I think most of the concerns are sort of with like hip opening exercises where you might be moving your legs something like this, or in situations where you are sort of bending forward. But unfortunately, off the top of my head, I can't remember all of those modifications, but they are out there.
Got it. Thanks for explaining. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other poses that you'd like to demo, or are we ready for the live sequence?
I think we could be ready. I always have more, that I could show, but those are definitely my top ones. Maybe just one other thing I'll mention that is personally one of my favorites, but can be tricky with spondylitis because it sort of depends on what's going on with your neck. But for me, one of my exercises that I love to do every day is to do neck circles, sort of half circles, sending my chin down towards my chest. But the tricky thing with that is if you do have either neck pain or any fusions, or if you're just kind of having a flare in your neck, then it's not a great idea to do that where you're kind of bringing that load to the neck. So I think it really has to be about what is going to feel best for you and your neck. Sometimes just sort of taking your gaze from side to side, not trying to force it all the way to the side, but just as far as can comfortably go. This is just a good one to maintain neck mobility. But I know that a lot of us get a lot of tension up here in our neck just from being at the computer or stressed. So that's why I really love this one. But if that's not accessible to you, even just massaging your neck can be great, or getting someone else to do it. But that's one of my favorites for if you're not having any significant neck pain or inflammation.
I love getting someone else to massage your neck. That's really the life goal there.
Yes. We should all be so lucky.
Yes. So since you just mentioned stress in the neck from sitting, working at the computer, I know that's so common. Similarly, are there any stretches you would recommend for sort of loosening up the shoulders?
Well, actually, I have one planned for our guided sequence. So I'll definitely show that. Depending on your mobility, anything where you're sort of opening up the shoulders in this type of way, even if you can't hold to your hands, you could hold a strap or hold onto a chair. Anything where you're sort of reversing that hunched over computer position.
Wonderful. And we have a couple other questions. One question. So after Shavasana, which if I'm not wrong, is kind of the final kind of resting pose after you go through a sequence. A lot of times yoga teachers tell us to curl up to one side and get up that way, but it hurts for me to be on my side due to bursitis. How would you suggest coming out of that Shavasana pose?
Yes, that's a great question. And I've actually had someone in class with a similar concern, I think not necessarily due to bursitis, but also they don't find that comfortable to come up that way. So what they often do is they actually just roll themselves up, which depending on sort of what's going on with your back and your core strength, I know is not always so easy, but there's different ways you can do it. You can either sort of just gently rock yourself up, or you could even hold on. Well, yeah, actually you could hold on to your mat. Maybe that's not the best modification. You could hold on to your legs to help you roll straight up. You could even have your legs straight out in front of you and hold on to your mat to roll up that way. So yeah, definitely different options if coming onto your side isn't comfortable.
Excellent. And for those who have never done yoga before, Shavasana is really just laying flat on your back. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's often used as the final resting pose at the end of class, just lying flat on your back on the floor.
Awesome. Another question, do you have specific stretches for the glutes or the hip or the SI area?
Yeah, all of those things. Let's see. So I think starting with the SI joints, I know that sometimes things where you are pigeon toeing your feet can be helpful. So sometimes I like to pigeon toe my feet and then come either down into a forward fold or sort of a table or desk supported forward fold, just to release the SI joints a little bit. I think also for the SI joints, sometimes doing a figure 4 stretch can be nice, and also actually for the glutes and hips as well, where you're maybe lying on your back, having one ankle crossed over the other knee. That's great for glutes and hips as well. There's a lot of different things for hips, actually. It kind of depends on what type of hip stretch you're thinking of. But let's see, one last favorite, maybe, well, actually this one, I really like doing windshield wiper knees, both for releasing out the hips and sort of the lower back. But I know that some people who have SI joint pain find that uncomfortable. And I've just found through teaching yoga that it really varies so much person to person, especially with spondylitis, what is going to sort of trigger certain types of pain. So I think just finding, again, what works best for you is really important.
Excellent. Okay. A couple more questions. So if somebody is starting yoga for the first time, how often per week should they attempt yoga?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that if you've, really never done it before in your life, maybe just starting with once a week and seeing how that feels. Or if you, find that you're really, really sore afterwards, maybe even a little bit longer. But I think there's, no really wrong answer to that. Maybe doing every single day at the beginning might be a little bit too much, but if it was a super gentle class, I think a few times a week would be fine.
Wonderful, thank you. And what should those living with spondyloarthritis look for in a yoga teacher?
So let's see. I think that one important thing is finding someone that you really like. So just making sure that you have that connection with them. I think sometimes that's kind of one of the most important things. I've gone to yoga classes where, for whatever reason, I didn't love that teacher's style. And it just made me not want to go to the class as much. So just finding someone you really like, whose class you enjoy, is important. Ideally, someone with a lot of experience and who just really seems open to you're asking for modifications and being open to understanding your own needs, I think is really important as well. In an ideal world, someone trained in yoga for arthritis or who's familiar with spondyloarthritis, but I think most of us know that many people don't seem to be familiar with spondyloarthritis, so that's a hard one.
But I think you mentioned earlier that you can go and search for teachers who are certified in yoga for arthritis. So that might be something that we could recommend that people do.
Yeah.
Excellent. And one last question. How might yoga fit into a more complete fitness regimen? So how might someone just getting into fitness at all really incorporate yoga along with things like cardio and strength training, for example?
Yeah, great question. So I think that trying to find that balance is good, because as great as yoga is, it's generally not the most intense cardio workout. And unless you're really doing like super intense power yoga, you might want to also have some other strength training. So you could, for example, like do a yoga class once a week and swim once a week and then do strength training once a week. Just trying to find kind of the balance that feels right for you. I know I keep saying that, but it really is just important to tailor everything to what feels best for you. And that might also change over time. If you start to really do a lot of yoga, then you might want to do it twice a week or even more. So just really being in tune with what feels best for you.
That's wonderful. And you really can't say it too many times, since everybody is different. Everyone has different abilities, different circumstances. It's really all about that individualized approach to fitness.
Definitely.
Okay. All right. And now I know you have a chair and standing yoga sequence that you've created just for this program that you're going to lead us through. So let's move into that. And for those of us who are following along at home, how should we all prepare to take part in this sequence?
Yes, so you can grab your chair with no wheels. And ideally, if you have a yoga mat, you can put it on the mat so that it doesn't move around, or on a rug, just ideally so that it's not sliding around. And then I'm just going to tilt my screen so you can see me. And if your feet do not reach the floor in your chair, if you have either a footstool or a pillow or some yoga blocks handy, just so that your feet can be grounded on the floor, then that would be ideal. So I'll just give it a moment, letting everyone get settled. And then once you have your setup, you can sit in your chair and sit away from the back of the chair if you can, so you can really lengthen your spine up tall. And then bring your feet either onto the floor or onto your footstool or pillow. And first, just think about lengthening your spine, lifting the crown of your head up toward the ceiling, but letting your shoulders float down away from your ears. And then if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, go ahead and close your eyes. Just starting to tune in with how you're feeling right now. Noticing what's happening with your heart rate and your breathing. Start to take some deep, slow breaths in and out through your nose. Notice any areas of pain or discomfort in your body. Imagine that you can send your breath towards those areas, imagining that you're softening them a little bit. And then on your next inhale, take a deep inhale through your nose, imagining you can fill your whole lungs and belly up with air. And then slowly exhale all the air out. And then whenever you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. So we'll begin by bringing our hands onto our lap, and we'll do some shoulder circles. So you can bring your shoulders up, back, down, and then forward. First taking a few rounds in this direction. This is a great one just for loosening up the shoulders and starting to stretch out all that connective tissue in there. And then you can flip your palms over and then circle your shoulders the opposite way. So forward, down, back, and then up. Going a few times in this direction. Maybe noticing how this direction feels different. And then you can bring your palms back down onto your lap. And then very gently bring one ear down towards one shoulder, just as far as feels comfortable and safe for you. Not letting the opposite shoulder hike up towards your ear, but still letting it come down, getting that nice stretch along the side of the neck. And then on your next inhale, come back up to center. And then exhale as you tilt your head towards the other side. And this movement does not have to be big at all. Even just a little bit of a tilt can really get a nice stretch along the outer edge of that neck and shoulder. And then on your next inhale, lift back to center. And then send your hands out in front of you and circle your wrists first going outwards. This is great for if you spend a lot of time typing. And then circle your wrist inwards. Then you can let your hands go and we'll circle our feet. If you need to scoot back and bring your back against your chair, you can. And then send your feet out in front of you at whatever height feels good. And then circle your ankles first going outwards. And then going inwards. Just starting to wake up the joints. And then bring your feet back down and sitting up nice and tall again. And then we'll bend from side to side a little bit. You can hold on either onto the side of your chair, or I sort of like holding onto the back leg of the chair. And then on your inhale, lift your spine up tall. And as you exhale, bend up and over towards the side. You can sort of press into that bottom hand. We'll be here for a couple of breaths. You can either bring your opposite hand to your hip, or maybe your fingertips come to your shoulder, or maybe if you'd like, you can reach your hand up overhead or over your ear. Wherever you are, just thinking about stretching from your hip to your armpit. And then on your next inhale, you can press down into that hand on your chair to lift yourself back up. And exhale to lower your hand. And we'll do the other side. So hold on to the other side of your chair, either that bottom part of the chair or maybe the back leg. And then on your inhale, think about extending your spine long. And then exhaling as you bend over towards the side. Again, your hand can come to your hip or maybe your shoulder, or maybe it reaches upwards. Think about keeping both of your hips grounded, not letting this one come up. Taking a breath here. And then on your next inhale, press down into your hand, lifting yourself back up to center. And then exhale that hand down. And then from here, we'll do our seated forward fold. So you can try it a couple different ways. You can either lengthen your spine forward and then come to fold over your legs, maybe resting your torso on your thighs and then letting your head hang down. Or if it's more comfortable for your stomach, You can bring your feet out wide. If you happen to have blocks or two pillows, that makes this easier. Or if you only had one footstool, then you could come to the edge of your seat so that you can put your feet on the floor and then hinge forward from your hips, just letting everything hang down. Maybe you might bring your hands onto your blocks or footstool and really just play with it and find which version feels most comfortable to you. And if when you hinge forward, maybe your torso doesn't quite come down to your thighs, that's fine. Just think about lengthening your spine forward and taking a few breaths wherever you are in your seated forward fold. And then when you're ready to come out of the pose, on your inhale, start to walk your hands up your legs until you come all the way back to upright. And then we will come up to stand. So if you used a footstool or anything, you can place that to the side for now. And then you'll come to the back of your chair. I'm going to move my chair so that you can see me more easily. And then you'll come to stand so that you can just reach your chair with your hands, and we'll come into a modified downward dog. So placing your hands on the back of the chair, start to walk your feet back behind you. And you'll have to see how far works best for you to walk your feet back. And then eventually you might start to let your torso sink down. You're aiming for really sending your sitting bones straight back behind you. So even if you're pretty close to your chair, you're thinking about sending your butt back, and maybe you walk your feet out further, lengthening out your back and your arms, taking a few breaths wherever you are in your modified downward dog. You can also bend your knees a lot here. That might feel good on your back, getting a little more length in your spine. Maybe you play with bending and straightening your legs a little bit, stretching out your hamstrings. Maybe you close your eyes for a moment. And then whenever you're ready to come out of your downward dog, on your inhale, press into your hands on your chair in order to start to lift yourself up and walk your feet back in towards your chair. And then you can release your hands from your chair. I'm just going to tilt this a tiny bit so you can see our next standing pose. So then you'll come to hold the back of your chair, but standing next to your chair this time rather than facing it. And we'll come into a modified tree. So I'm going to start with my left side closest to my chair. So bring your weight into either your left foot or the foot closest to your chair. You're holding onto the back of the chair. You can have your right hand on your hip, and then you'll come to the ball of your right foot and then turn your leg out from your hip. And then you can either place your heel against your leg with your ball of your foot still on the floor, or you might place your foot on your calf. So choose which option feels best for you. Another option is to put your foot up on your thigh. Just make sure not to put your foot against your knee. And then wherever you are in your tree, think about really lifting up tall from the arch of your standing foot all the way up through your rib cage and the crown of your head. Think about pressing your foot into your leg and your leg into your foot. Maybe if you'd like, you might extend your opposite arm up toward the ceiling, taking a couple breaths in your tree. And then when you're ready, you can lower your arm, release your foot from your leg, and shake out your legs. Nice job. So then we'll do the other side. I'm going to move my chair. Depending on your device configuration and chair configuration, you could also just come to the other side of your chair. And then I'll bring my weight into my right foot, holding onto the chair with my right hand, coming onto the ball of my left foot, and then turning out the whole leg from the hip. And then decide if you want to have your ball of your foot on the floor, heel against your leg. Maybe bring your foot onto your calf or your thigh. And then really think about standing up tall. Think about the strength of your standing leg holding you up, lifting up to your rib cage and the crown of your head. Maybe you reach that opposite arm up. Balancing poses like this are great for strengthening the legs and, of course, for balance. Taking another breath in your tree. And then when you're ready, you can lower that arm down, release the foot from your leg, and shake out the legs. Nice work. So from here, we will come back to sit on our chairs. So you can place it back how you had it originally, and then find your footstool or footstool substitute. Bringing your feet down, sitting up tall. And then we'll come into a couple of very gentle twists here. So begin by, on your inhale, lifting your hands up toward the ceiling, however far they want to go. And then as you exhale, turn towards your right side, and then let your hands both come down towards your right. And you can either just gently rest your hand on top of your thigh. You can hold onto the chair a little bit, but don't crank yourself over to the side with force. Taking a couple breaths in your twist. And your head can either just stay in line with your torso, or maybe you look a little bit towards your right side. Taking a couple of breaths, still thinking about keeping your spine long. And then when you're ready, on your next exhale, slowly with control, come back to center, bringing your hands back to your lap. Taking a breath in the center, letting your spine reset. And then we'll do the other side. So on your inhale, lifting your fingertips up, lengthening your spine. And then as you exhale, turning gently towards your left, letting your hands come down on your left side, resting your right hand on top of your left thigh. And then just gently staying in this twist. Again, your head can either just stay in line with your torso, or maybe look a little bit towards your left, keeping your spine long as you breathe in your twist. Maybe closing your eyes. And then when you're ready, on your next exhale, slowly twisting back to center, bringing your hands to your lap. And taking a breath in the center. And then we'll take one more forward fold before we do our final meditation. So sit up nice and tall on your sitting bones, reaching your spine up, and then hinge forward from your hips, maybe walking your hands down your legs, maybe letting your head gently hang down if that feels okay for your neck. Or bringing your knees out wide if that's more comfortable. Whatever version of forward fold feels good for you. Taking a breath or two here. And then on your next inhale, start to walk your hands back up your legs. Coming back upright. And then we will come into a final relaxation. So if you'd like to sit back in your chair a little bit more so that you can rest your back on the back of the chair, go ahead. Getting comfortable, and then if you'd like, you can close your eyes. Taking a few deep breaths in and out through your nose. Just noticing again how you're feeling physically and mentally. And then I invite you to join me in a guided visualization, which I learned from a teacher at Integral Yoga, which he in turn got from a Buddhist monk. And this is a Buddhist visualization which has been written about by Tulku Thondup. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. He's a Buddhist monk. So closing your eyes, take a moment just to notice any areas where you either are having pain or discomfort now, or where you tend to have pain. And imagine that in that place, there's a storm cloud that's super dark and stormy, roiling, full of thunder and lightning, maybe a little bit angry and loud. And then each time you exhale, imagine that you're blowing air towards that storm cloud. And each time you do that, it gets a little bit smaller, a little bit less stormy. Inhaling deeply through your nose, and then exhaling towards that storm cloud, watching it get smaller each time. And then after a few exhales, it gets so small, and then it just becomes a nice white puffy cloud, not stormy at all, just floating in the sky. And then with a couple more exhales, it gets so tiny, you can't even see it, and then it just disappears, blowing away on the wind. Now imagine that you're just inhaling in that blue sky, inhaling the clean air, and exhaling into that blue sky. And then you can allow your breathing just to return to its natural, normal pace. Taking a few more breaths in and out through your nose. And then if you'd like, you can join me in bringing your hands together at the center of your chest, maybe coming away from the back of your chair, taking a deep inhale in. And then as you exhale, you can gently bow your head towards your hands just as much as is comfortable for you. Feeling gratitude for taking this time for yourself today. And as we like to say in yoga, namaste, which means the light in me greets the light in you. So namaste, everyone.
Namaste. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank
was
you
lovely.
all for joining.
That was really beautiful. Thank you so much for that wonderful visualization.
You're very welcome. I hope you all enjoyed it. One of my favorites.
Excellent. So just a couple of extra questions. What would you say to someone who doesn't exercise because for them it hurts too much? It seems like it makes their pain worse.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would say if there's anything at all you can find that doesn't make the pain worse, even just the smallest thing, sometimes just doing some stretches lying down in bed, even just what seems like the smallest stretch. If you can find something that doesn't cause pain, just focusing on that. But I think also, of course, always talking to your doctor or a physical therapist to try to find something that can be accessible. Maybe you've already tried everything, but maybe there's something out there that you haven't tried yet. So just trying to find something that works. And if there really doesn't seem to be anything, maybe just trying to notice the difference between like a sharp pain and more of a muscular pain. Sometimes if it's just, a little bit of like a muscular pain, sort of a soreness or like a pain of effort, if it's not true pain, then that might be okay. But if it is that sort of sharp, more acute type of pain, then of course trying to avoid things that cause that kind of pain. But yeah, that's tough. I feel for you for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Any final closing thoughts, Sandra, before we end the program?
I think that's all that I had. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining. And I think there will be a handout posted with some further info. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Rachel has my email, and this has been really fun. So thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sandra, for spending your time with us and your wonderful guided flow and expertise. For more about exercise and yoga, especially for those with spondyloarthritis, you can check out SAA's exercise video, Back in Action Again, for a full program of exercises tailored specifically to those with spondyloarthritis, along with the resources that Sandra mentioned earlier in the program. So thank you everybody for watching. We appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.